Uh-oh, I've been binging a lot of Ben 10 content recently, and I really want to talk about it. Kai Green's voice actress was in Stargate Infinity. And I'm just realizing that Robert Picardo, who played Richard Woolsey in Stargate Atlantis, was in the Ben 10 movie Race Against Time.
It's so hot.
Miss me?
Oh, yes.
Hello and welcome to another Stargate video, and in this one I want to ask the question that almost no one was thinking. Though I did see a post on Reddit about this subject after I wrote the initial script, so at least I know I'm not alone in asking this. What if the Omnitrix existed in the Stargate universe? I'm going to assume the overlap between the Ben 10 and Stargate fandoms is very small, so a quick rundown of each franchise in case you are unfamiliar with either. The Stargate franchise revolves around a device known as the Stargate, which allows for near instantaneous transportation to other worlds. It was built by ancients long ago and stayed dormant until humanity broke the code. Now it takes us through the universe on a mission to defend the Earth. Some of the major threats include the parasitic snake-like race known as the Goa'uld, who visited Earth long ago and assumed the identities of gods from various pantheons, taking humans as slaves or hosts and spreading them throughout the galaxy. There's also the vampiric wraith that feed on humans that defeat the gate builders in a war in another galaxy. Next we have Ben 10, which follows the character of Ben Tennyson and the alien device known as the Omnitrix. The device did what it did and stuck itself upon his wrist with secrets that it hid. Now he's got superpowers, he's no ordinary kid. Basically, the Omnitrix lets the user turn into one of 10 alien forms for about 10 minutes before a cooldown. Though later Ben would get more aliens and be able to stay in alien form for much longer. The aliens Ben turns into usually have some kind of superpower. Some are generic like super speed, while other times they can be a little weird.
What's this thing supposed to do?
You're going to eat it.
I know this is a strange combination of two franchises that have almost nothing in common. Stargate is a military space show about the modern US military fighting ancient aliens, and Ben 10 is a superhero show that at times gets serious, but also can get kind of cartoony. And I mean that in both the best and worst ways possible. Again, a weird combination, but I like weird crossovers like this. A fun fact, when I was a kid on the playground, I used kinetics to build an Omnitrix that let me turn to aliens from Halo.
Were it so easy.
To be clear on something, this is not if Ben or the Omnitrix traveled to the Stargate universe from their own. Magic, factions, or aliens from Ben 10 are not going to pop up here. The only difference is if the Omnitrix naturally exists in Stargate. And I actually think a device like the Omnitrix could exist in Stargate, as we do see a race with shape-shifting technology. Well, kind of. This species was introduced in the SG-1 episode The Spirits and is called The Spirits, though extended lore does give them a proper name. They seem to have technology that allows them to transform into perfect copies of other beings, from people to animals. And I mean transform, not holographic mimic technology like with the aliens from the Foothold incident. Though it is important to note that the Omnitrix doesn't turn the wearer into a genetic duplicate of the donor. Anyway, this tech does prove that at the very least shapeshifting with technology is possible in Stargate. Though I said kind of earlier because the show never states how the spirits are able to shapeshift or make people disappear. Some believe they can do this because this race is closer to Ascension. Ascension is the process of being able to turn yourself into a being of pure energy. It's partly an evolutionary thing, and the closer one is to it, the more abilities you can have, such as psychic powers or healing. That's a bit of an oversimplification, I'll get into details later, but that's one fan explanation for the spirit's powers. They're biological abilities they can just naturally do. However, I'm of the camp that thinks their abilities are just them using technology that is so advanced it looks like magic, which is supported in the Alderac RPG. Granted, the extended media aren't strictly canon with the shows, but we do have other examples of technologies in the Stargate universe that could support the idea of an Omnitrix-like device existing. In the SG-1 episode Upgrade, some members of SG-1 are given these armbands that increase the natural abilities of whoever wears it, resulting in powers such as super speed and strength. This device works by releasing a virus into the wearer's body, allowing the device to interface with the wearer. If I recall correctly, this is a fan theory for how the Omnitrix works. It releases a fast-acting virus that will alter the DNA of the user to turn them into aliens. And in Stargate, we know it is possible to turn one species into another. The biggest example is through the retrovirus. Introduced in Stargate Atlantis, the retrovirus was designed to turn a Wraith into a human. Granted, this works because the Wraith already have some human DNA. The virus just suppresses the Wraith part of their DNA. But we know that variations of this virus can turn humans into more Wraith-like forms. The Atlantis Legacy books took this concept further, with a human being turned into a full-blown Wraith. Actually, we can take this to a whole new level with something. If an Omnitrix did exist in Stargate, it probably would have been built by the Ancients, because almost everything in Stargate relates to them. We know they built devices that allowed them to manipulate DNA, but they also built the Dakara's super device. Or they used it to initially seed life in the galaxy. It gets a bit confusing since both ideas are stated, but we know the device works by reducing all matter to its basic molecular elements. Perhaps this Omnitrix would work like that, breaking down the user's body and remaking it into the alien selected. The Omnitrix exists for various reasons in Ben 10. The big two I think relevant to this scenario is A, to let species gain a better understanding of one another, and B, to act as a backup for extinct species. Which honestly, both are reasons I can see an Ancient making the device. Though kind of the funniest reason was Azimuth created the Omnitrix hoping his former girlfriend would notice. It would be hilarious if this version of the Omnitrix existed for a similar reason. So I think I've set a good foundation for how and why an Omnitrix could exist in Stargate, and after really thinking about it, I can actually see how the two stories could intertwine for an episode. Stargate Command gets reports of alien sightings across the nation. SG-1 is sent to find out where these aliens are coming from, but there's confusion. The reports show multiple aliens, but it's always just one or two in a town or city. The aliens spotted really have nothing to do with one another, their species are not known for working together, and it seems to be the same aliens over and over again. What is most odd is that the aliens seem to be helping people. Not that aliens helping humans is odd, Earth has various alliances with aliens, but this helping is more like someone trying to play superhero. And eventually they learn that's what this is. They manage to find one of these aliens, and then the watch times out to reveal a 10-year-old kid. I don't imagine that this Ben would have found the watch the same way Prime Ben did, with it falling out of the sky. I imagine that this Ben, when walking in the woods, would fall into a hole and find some ancient underground lab that held the watch. To sadly disappoint the Ben 10 fans, this theoretical episode would most likely end with Ben losing the Omnitrix. Besides Stargate not operating on cartoon logic where a 10-year-old is allowed to keep advanced alien technology, there's a few reasons why the watch would be taken away. First, in Stargate, the public isn't aware of the existence of aliens, and the US government goes to great lengths to prevent that knowledge from coming out. The argument being it would cause mass panic if people knew. So Ben going hero would risk exposing the secret, and that's just something they would not tolerate. Second is elements of the government and scientists at the SGC would want to study the device. The mandate of Stargate Command is to find new technologies to defend the planet. Something like the Omnitrix, technology that changes a person into other life forms, would be incredibly useful. Third and finally, the Omnitrix puts a giant target on Ben's head. Plenty of factions would want the device. While Ben being on Earth gives him some protection, as Earth is a protected planet, there is one faction that this really wouldn't stop. The Trust, a terrorist organization that believes they have the right to use any means necessary to defend the Earth. Once they hear of the Omnitrix, they'd be very interested in acquiring the device, especially since while they claim to want to defend the Earth, part of their motivation is personal gain. And if Ben got the watch after the System Lords took control of the Trust, now he would have to deal with power-hungry snakes that pose as gods coming after him. Now I know some people are going to say that Prime Ben has dealt with threats like this, the Forever Knights for example, so he should be fine. But remember, I said this Omnitrix wouldn't have access to the aliens from Ben's universe. I will be fair to this Ben, as some aliens in Stargate do have powers, and some of those powers are pretty good, as I'll get to later. If anyone could find a use for them as heroes, it would be a Ben Tennyson. The thing is, while some aliens in Stargate have superpowers, most are just people like you or I, and the ones that have special abilities don't exactly give a full balanced power set. This Ben wouldn't have any speedsters, flyers, or fire-based aliens. He might get a strong guy or even an electrical-based alien, because even in another universe, Ben still gets electric aliens. But these aliens have limits. Unitors might be strong and slightly more durable than a human, but use enough firepower and they'll go down. And that electrical alien I showed, A, doesn't have a body, B, we don't know if it was an alien or some kind of AI, and C, radio waves are deadly to life on its planet, so kind of not really useful for average hero work on a planet with constant radio waves going around. So the superpowered aliens are kind of limited in abilities, and there's just a limited number of them. This Ben would be lucky if even half his aliens had powers. Which, by the way, some of you might wonder why I haven't stated which aliens this Ben would get. To be honest, I don't really think it matters in this scenario. Even if this Ben got super lucky and the 10 aliens in the active playlist were the best, most powerful aliens in Stargate, I just don't think he could use them effectively enough to keep the watch. Another factor to consider is when one transforms with the Omnitrix, their alien form is still their age. So when Ben turns into a Tetraman, he's still only a 10-year-old Tetraman. Granted, it would be a prime example of the species, but still only of that age. Now in Stargate, we don't know how most species age and grow, but I doubt Ben would be doing a lot of hero work as Bushhead Kid. My overall point here is that this Ben is in a weaker position compared to Classic. And the Trust doesn't even have to go straight to child torture, though they easily could. They could just threaten to frame Ben's family for some crime and force him to turn himself over. That's not a problem you can just punch your way out of. Just realistically, if a Ben in this universe got the watch, he might be able to do some heroic stuff, but I give it like 3 days, maybe a week tops before he's found and the watch removed. Hopefully by the SGC. Yes, the Omnitrix is hard to remove, but Earth does have contact with various advanced alien civilizations, some of whom used to be allies with the Ancients. I'm sure they could find some way to remove the device without taking Ben's arm off. I did try and think if there was any situation where Ben could keep the watch. The only one I could think of is having Ben get the watch when he was older. Like, this Ben would have been born earlier in the timeline and joins the military to follow in his grandpa's footsteps. I'll get into that idea later. At some point he gets into the Stargate program and in an off-world mission gets the watch that way. They'd bench him from off-world duty until they can figure out what the device is it affecting his mind, and how to remove it. But then there's some situation and the device can be used to stop it. Whoever's in command at the time might be willing to let Ben use the device, but I doubt they would let him go into the field with it regularly, and the end goal would still be to have the device removed from Ben. So yeah, if a version of Ben existed in Stargate, he would not become the hero of heroes. And if somebody else got the watch, let's say Jack or Sam, then a similar sequence of events would probably happen and the watch would be removed. This next section is just me going through some interesting ideas or scenarios for this concept, which personally I found more interesting than trying to write a way for Ben to keep the watch. They don't have any particular order, it's just me jumping around and talking nerd stuff. Something kind of interesting about the Goa'uld is they have genetic memory. Each symbiote contains a complete memory of their lineage. Which makes me wonder about a Goa'uld or even Tok'ra transformation. Normally transformations are blank slates the wearer takes control of, but if memory was a genetic thing for the species selected, would that transformation develop a personality or identity separate from the wearer? There's precedent for stuff like this happening in both Ben 10 and Stargate. For Ben, the most well-known and closest to this line of thinking is the transformation Ghost Freak. With his species, the Ectoneurites, their consciousness can exist in even a few strands of DNA. So when a sample was taken for the Omnitrix, the consciousness of Ziskar was trapped in the watch and on one occasion took partial or even full control of Ben. And yes, I'm aware of the pop-up trivia that says he did this more than once. In Stargate, we have an example of this with Sekhmet. She was a Goa'uld whose DNA was spliced with a human ovium by the rogue NID to create a Goa'uld human hybrid named Anna. Due to the genetic memory thing, Sekhmet emerged as a distinct personality different from Anna's. So if a Goa'uld transformation existed, I'd imagine it would create problems for the wearer where the transformation would try and take control of them. A Tok'ra one might be better as they believe in living in true symbiotic relationship with the host, but you'd still have the issue of a transformation developing its own identity. I also wonder how useful a symbiote transformation would be. Like, sure, you could possess people, but unless the symbiote is near water, you would need to take a host to survive. Also, what would happen if you detransformed inside of someone? Honestly, I don't even want to go down that line of thinking. Something I kept thinking about for Ben getting the watch section was how Grandpa Max would react. In the Ben 10 franchise, Max was a plumber.
Because your sink was clogged?
No, plumbers are intergalactic police officers.
I doubt they would exist as an intergalactic police force in this what if. Given the Goa'uld dominate the galaxy, it would not tolerate such an organization. Maybe you can have them as a rebel group made up of various aliens the System Lords have dominated, but I already said I wanted the only change to be the Omnitrix existing for this what if. The classic series set them up more as a human organization that dealt with extraordinary stuff, which could work as there was some alien stuff going on before the start of SG-1, but it was rather limited and the government didn't even know about most of it. So not enough to create some shadow group of alien hunters. If Max did have any knowledge of aliens, the best way to explain that is to say he was in the military and worked at the base with the Stargate. And if we use that idea, it might explain why this Max didn't contact the authorities when Ben got the watch. While the US had had the gate since 1939, they couldn't get it to work until 1994. They did get the gate to open once, but this led to the supposed loss of Dr. Littlefield. Maybe this Max heard about this while at the base or was even there to witness it. This might have led him to distrust the government given they covered up the whole thing and is worried the same thing will happen to his grandson. Granted, this kind of depends on the timeline, but one thing that would be clear is that this Max might be aware of the possible existence of aliens, but wouldn't have the deeper knowledge like Prime Max does. So here's an interesting little rabbit hole to go down. For transformations to be viable, it must have different DNA from the user or any DNA already scanned. Makes sense, but there's one little tidbit that makes this interesting. Ben's alien Upchuck has two different transformations. This is because his species, the Gormans, is made up of two subspecies, the Perks and Mercs. Despite seemingly being the same life form in every way except looks, apparently this is enough of a genetic difference that the two count as two different transformations. This gets interesting because in Stargate, humans exist on multiple worlds across multiple galaxies. Some were moved from Earth by ancient aliens, and others were seemingly created on their homeworlds, also by ancient aliens.
Different aliens.
I have a whole video about this, but I bring it up now because if the Gormans can have two different transformations due to this slight genetic difference, would that also apply to the human groups? Like, would each one get their own transformation? For human worlds that descend from Earth, you think the answer would be no, as there wouldn't be enough time for significant genetic difference to arise. Stuff like that takes millions of years, meanwhile these humans were moved off of Earth only around 10,000 years ago at max. However, then we have Jonas Quinn. Jonas is a human from the planet Langara who joined SG-1 for a short time. On two different occasions, System Lords made note that Jonas was different from his Earth-born counterparts on a genetic level. And it's noticed that Jonas seems to have the ability to learn new things at a higher rate compared to others. Now, admittedly, this could be something specific to Jonas himself and not the rest of his people. And maybe he's more a step in the evolutionary tree of humanity, but I still wonder how different he is and if he would count as a transformation. And what about the peoples of the Pegasus and Ori galaxies? As far as we know, the humans of these galaxies are not descended from Earth humans. Are they different enough genetically to be counted as separate transformations? What about people in Pegasus like Taylor who have Wraith DNA, which resulted in her having some powers like Wraith sensing and possession? If you scanned her, would you get a Wraithkin transformation? What about the Ancients? While they are humans, they are the first known evolution of life in the human form. They didn't evolve on Earth and aren't from the Milky Way, though they did have some hand in the evolution of humans on Earth. The main difference between them and humans from Earth is that they are further ahead in the evolutionary tree. This meant they could have certain abilities such as higher intelligence, healing, telepathy, and telekinesis, which ties into the Ascension thing I mentioned earlier that, again, I will get to later. While abilities like this weren't really shown off all that much, I kind of imagine an ancient transformation would have these abilities. One last thought is the Priors. They were beings the Ori artificially evolved to attain some near-ascended abilities. Are they genetically different enough from baseline humans to count? I don't have a yes or no answer to some of these questions, but I'm slightly confident in saying no for the Priors. I say that because for a time, Prime Ben had a device called the Omnitrix, which evolved his aliens into more battle-hardened versions. Later, this device was removed and he was given the final version of the Omnitrix, but as I understand, the Omnitrix cannot accept the DNA of ultimate forms. I couldn't find a reason for this, but given the priors are also artificially evolved beings, I feel like the Omnitrix would not scan them either. I am willing to be wrong on that. This section isn't really about finding definitive answers, it's just a rabbit hole I really want to explore to some degree and hear your thoughts on. Also, yes, the Jaffa would count as their own transformation if a human wore the device, but that would really just be a human transformation with a pouch. Without the symbiote, you wouldn't get the healing or strength. One thing that makes Stargate such a cool show is that we'll introduce a piece of technology that can be used later. It could be used in a one-off episode, other times it will be for more major story beats, and sometimes the tech will become part of the mainline arsenal for the team. If an Omnitrix existed in the Stargate universe, it could be used in a similar way. For example, the expedition could study the Omnitrix's ability to change life forms and use that as a basis to develop some kind of beam tech that could change species, as opposed to the retrovirus I talked about earlier. Or maybe Earth studies the device and is able to reverse engineer it and make multiple watches. Ironically enough, this will lead to Earth having a military that could do what Vilgax wanted to do, have an army of shapeshifters.
Picture an entire army, each in command of an Omnitrix, and all at my command.
This idea reminds me of the Green Lantern Star Trek comic, where a version of the DC universe died and members of the various Lantern Corps ended up in a version of Star Trek's Kelvin timeline. That story ended where Starfleet was able to create their own version of power rings. If I recall correctly, while they couldn't figure out how to make constructs, the rings still have the low-level abilities of the lanterns. Although, as I say that, there are holes for this idea in Stargate. I can buy that the Federation in Star Trek is able to make power rings in like a day, because they are a technologically advanced society. But Earth in Stargate is still just modern Earth. Sure, by the end of the shows they have access to Atlantis and the Asgard core, but Earth would need time to really understand these alien technologies and find a way to replicate them. In its own franchise, the Omnitrix is the most advanced and powerful technology in 5 galaxies. And it's been stated that there can really only be one true Omnitrix at a given moment. I'm not saying that Earth will never figure out how to replicate the watch or find other uses for it. I'm saying it's going to take them time to figure out all the workings of the watch. And I don't want to see one comment about how Reboot Kevin made the Antitrix in his garage based on blueprints he got in a dream from an alien in an other dimensional prison. That is just dumb. Honestly, if the SGC got the Omnitrix, while I do see them studying the device, I kind of see them locking it away in Area 51 or trying to destroy it after deeming it too dangerous, which characters in Stargate have done on more than one occasion. Some of those occasions were either accidents or merely disabling the device, but the point still stands. Granted, the Omnitrix is basically indestructible, but I can see them at least trying. I've mentioned Ascension a few times and I would explain it later. Well, later is now. One thing to keep in mind about Ascension is the rules of it aren't exactly clear.
Yeah, it's not exactly a clear-cut set of instructions, is it?
No.
Like I said, Ascension is the process of becoming a being of pure energy and living in the higher planes. Think of ascended beings similar to the Q from Star Trek. They have a variety of abilities such as controlling nature, being intangible/invisible, and various mind-based powers to name a few. However, it's important to note that they are not all powerful or even all-knowing. They just have a greater understanding of the universe. I actually struggled trying to figure out if the Omnitrix, the Prime Universe one, can turn someone into an ascended being. I went through the rules of what can be a valid transformation. I looked at Alien X, whose species, the Celestial Sapiens, are a race of powerful reality warping beings. If the Omnitrix can have that as a transformation, it stands as a reason it can scan ascended beings. But then you have Anodites, a race of energy beings who cannot be scanned by the Omnitrix due to not having DNA. This led me down the road if ascended beings have DNA, and I just went down rabbit holes like this, trying to figure this out, until I remembered something. Something that led me to the conclusion of no, you can't become an ascended being with the Omnitrix. See, while Ascension does have an evolutionary component to it, there's another arguably more important one, a spiritual or mental one. It's a component you can't really calculate and requires a sort of inner reflection that you can't machine your way out of. In fact, during the war with the Wraith, the Ancients built a machine that was supposed to allow them to ascend. The problem was, while it could artificially evolve the body to the point it could ascend, giving them powers like mind reading or making them smarter, it couldn't release their burdens, as Oma might say. So unless I'm missing some key part of how the Omnitrix works, I'd say no. It cannot turn someone into an ascended being. By the way, just to comment on something I said earlier, the Ancients and having powers, Stargate handles this weirdly because we know they could have those abilities, they were an evolutionary thing, and we do see some have them. It's on a small individual level, we never really see it on a societal or species-wide level. I've seen a few different explanations for this. Usually when we see ancient society, it's from the Lantean era, which many fans think is a downgrade compared to the previous Alteran era. So maybe these abilities were just not as common when they lived in Pegasus? Or maybe when these abilities developed, the individual ancients would go off to learn how to ascend? Would that change how an ancient transformation works? Maybe, like if you scanned Helia, who showed no evidence of powers, then no. But Ayana did, so if you scanned her, then yes? For the final part of this video, I will make a playlist based on the aliens from the Stargate universe. To be clear, this is not the theoretical playlist Stargate Ben would have. This playlist is going to be for an Omnitrix from the Ben 10 universe, just with Stargate aliens. That way I can include aliens that realistically a Stargate Omnitrix would not have. This is mostly just to have fun and stuff, you know? For how I'm going to build this playlist, I'm balancing 3 main perspectives, a military one, a hero one, and finally one for just everyday use. This is a point I saw in an Ink Tank video recently. Like, how would you use your aliens in a normal everyday setting without the threat of aliens invading Earth or some big bad? It's a really interesting point because even as a kid, I imagined stuff like that. Like using Accelerate to go on vacation so I don't have to deal with the hassle of actually traveling to where I'm vacationing. I can just grab my backpack and go.
You want to drive all the way to Florida?
Also, yes, I did make names for these guys to shout. Most of them will probably suck, and I'm sure someone will have better name ideas than me, but hey, it's part of the fun in Ben 10.
What's with the shouting names thing anyway?
It strikes fear into my enemies.
You go right on believing that, bud.
Number 10, the Riol. The Riol have a unique design and a very unique defensive ability. They secrete a chemical that spreads through close proximity. The chemical will alter memories and facial recognition of a person who comes into contact with it. The person's mind will fill in the details, and instead of seeing a Riol, they would see someone familiar to them, even if that person doesn't exist. It's very similar to the powers of the memory parasites from Rick and Morty. I'll be honest, I think this transformation would have limited uses, like gathering intelligence on or to fool specific people. It would be very useful, but like out in public, probably not as much, because if someone is far enough away, they wouldn't be affected by the chemical and would see the skeleton figure of the Riol and probably call the cops. They do have a small healing factor, so this transformation does have a one-up on some others, but I feel like outside of specific situations, this transformation wouldn't get a lot of uses, especially in everyday situations. I can think of some things for everyday uses, but they kind of range from being petty to downright villainous. That being said, I prefer to have the power and not need it, rather than need it and not have it. As for the name, I would dub this transformation Geisling. Number 9, the Ritu. You ever want the most cheating power in the whole universe? May present the Ritu, whose matter waves are 180 degrees out of phase with the rest of the universe. As a result, their light and sound waves cannot be detected by most, which has the effect of making them invisible. Despite being out of phase, they can still interact with objects in our phase to a certain degree. They also are immune to most conventional weapons. At most, it will slow them down. Do I even need to defend this choice? Invisibility and near invulnerability to most weapons? Like, invisibility is a good superpower, but the big problem with it is if they know you're there, there's ways to find you. Like throwing some powder in the air or listening for footsteps. Even just shooting randomly in the vicinity, all it takes is one stray bullet and your cover is blown. But with Ritu, that just wouldn't be the case. It's not an ability you have to think of actively. Now in Stargate, this isn't as useful since symbiotes can sense their presence, and transphase eradication rods can make Ritu visible and kill them. And I'm sure in Ben 10 there would be ways to detect a Ritu as well, but like in the real world, if you could turn into a Ritu, you're basically untouchable. As for what I would use this form for, mostly just so I can't be seen. I don't know why, but the power of invisibility just really appeals to me. I'd turn into a Ritu just so I can have the comfort of knowing that no one can see me. If I ever did end up needing to really hide or get into a fight, I can see this transformation being very useful. For a name, I'm gonna call this Invisitoid. Number 8, the Asgard. I am really trying hard not to make a gray matter comparison here, but like, super smart aliens that are also short. And yes, before someone comments, the Asgard are just default smarter than humans. Honestly, there's so many different uses for this form due to the intelligence. Making computer programs, doing complicated math problems, filling out tax forms. Heck, I even found some fan art made of an Asgard transformation in Ben 10, which I think looks pretty neat. Asgard are best guard. Though, a funny little note on the Asgard's size and look. The Asgard only look like this because in an effort to achieve immortality, they started cloning themselves over and over. This led to their bodies being degraded and they could no longer reproduce sexually. And this led to their near extinction. The Omnitrix has the ability to repair damaged DNA, so for those who are still mad most of the Asgard ended their lives when the damage became too great, this could be a way to fix them. Another interesting fact is when the Omnitrix scans aliens, no matter the condition of the being in question, the device will create a prime version of said species. So if an Asgard was scanned, then instead of the little gray men, we'd probably see a version of an Asgard before they started cloning themselves. So in theory, this transformation wouldn't be that short. There is one issue. The watch will create clothing based on the selected alien's own culture, but with the Asgard, as far as we can tell, they don't wear clothes. So I really wouldn't be able to use this alien in public unless I want to be put on a list.
She's supposed to be naked like that.
Anyway, my name for this transformation? Aesir. Number 7, the Wraith. So what would I do with a space vampire that is nearly immortal and has to feed on humans? Okay, jokes aside, I think a Wraith would be a very useful transformation. I said this earlier, but a lot of aliens in Stargate are just that, normal aliens. They don't have the super durability that you see in a lot of Ben 10 aliens. There's a few on this list that have some form of healing or durability to that kind of damage, but even then they have their limits. The Wraith are kind of an exception to this. Sure, as Atlantis went on, they became easier and easier to kill, but as the lore goes, the Wraith can heal from almost anything. Though this healing is proportional to how long ago they fed. And here's the thing, if I'm forced into a situation where I have to use this transformation, it's probably a life or death fight. If it's that kind of fight, and it's between me and someone who wishes me harm, I'm picking me. And I can always give the life force back, I'm not saying I'd keep it. Besides, the Wraith have plenty of other good abilities. Strength, agility, they can see in the dark, they possess telepathic abilities. I can make a psychic projection of a shadowy ghost appear in a human's field of vision, and I can incapacitate the minds and therefore the bodies of my victims, opponents. Granted, these powers seem more dominant and powerful in the females of the species, but males can do it to some extent. And again, if the Omnitrix turns the wearer into a prime version of the species, I'd imagine that a Wraith transformation would have some of these abilities. I think my favorite power would be the ability to make illusions as seen in the short story Consort, where seldom seen, a male Wraith uses his power to hide his presence because he's so tired and just wants to sit in a chair where no one can bother him. Is it kinda obvious I like invisibility as a power? As for the name, Dampier. Number 6, the Owns. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of Stargate fans didn't know the species had a name. The name in a lot of their lore was introduced in the Alderac RPG and later used in the Wyvern RPG. Though oddly enough, there are 2 ways to spell the species name and both are used. What we do know is that they are a semi-aquatic species that seem to have some kind of psychic blast powers. The Alderac RPG would expand on this so they can communicate telepathically, while the Wyvern RPG hints that these powers are more like ascended abilities. Either way, a fish person that can send out psychic blasts that can operate on land and in sea is just useful. I don't go into water a lot. I don't have a fear of water, it's more I fear what's in it. I'd probably go into the water more if I could have a power like this. Not to mention, this would just be useful for any situations involving water. They do have a weakness and they have to spend at least 3 hours a day underwater or suffer from dehydration, again lore from the RPG. But own scientists did develop a device that lets them stay out of the water for up to 5 days, and the Omnitrix is able to create technology that allows species to live outside of their natural environment, like Goop's anti-gravity thing. While I wouldn't use them outside of water-based situations, honestly, it's good to have that kind of speciality, especially with the psychic blast thing. For a name, I'm thinking Syphes. Number 5, The Beast. I wanted to include something from Universe. Out of the 3 major Stargate show, this one has always kind of looked down upon. I liked it, season 2 was a big improvement over the first, and I wanted to give it some representation. The thing is, we didn't see a lot of aliens in Universe. There's the blue guys, whose name we didn't get in the show. The Urusai, who aren't bad, they have a good look to them. They're also quite nimble and surprisingly speedy. But if I had to pick an alien from Universe, I would pick the Beast. This large 6-legged creature that is strong and quick. There's an argument to be made that it's not smart enough, but it did show signs of intelligence and did let members of the Destiny go when it recognized them as intelligent beings as well. If Ben can have something like a Vulpomancer, I think I can have the Beast. This thing shows itself to be a great hunter, which can be used in a lot of different ways, finding enemy targets or lost people. As for what I would use this for, probably just as a way to get around. I walk a lot of places, so being able to do so fast would be really nice. They don't have super speed, but they are pretty fast. Also, I think it would be cool to have an alien that's not humanoid. Maybe with this form I can truly understand the inner workings of cats. On that note, my name for this form? Ces Jaguar. Number 4, the Furling. Number 3, the Unis. You know, I'm not a person who really enjoys doing physically demanding things. Like, I have no issue doing things that need to be done, like yard work, repairing fences, or moving. But I find I'm constantly being dragged into stuff like digging holes, cutting down trees, and just generally having to do a lot of home improvement projects for other people. So having a transformation that is just physically superior in strength would be such a time saver for me. The Unis are also faster and more durable than humans, so that would make them useful too. I kind of went in reverse here, but a transformation like this would also be useful for hero and military stuff. There's plenty of situations where having a sort of strong guy in the list, like Forearms or Humongousaur, would be great. And yes, I did just compare an Unis to those two. Maybe I should have compared him to Kickenhawk, but you get my point about a physically strong alien in the playlist. Anyway, here's the name for this transformation: Reptas. Number 2, the Minnows. So if you've been watching this channel for some time or paid attention to this video, you know I'm a fan of the Stargate external media. The RPGs, books, comics, games, etc. I just think they're cool. They help expand the world beyond the TV shows, and sometimes I think they tell stories that could have been episodes in the show. Are some bad? Oh, definitely yes, but some are good. I recently started listening to the audio dramas, which were voiced by the original actors, and those are really good. Anyway, I want to include something from the external media, and I settled on the Minnows from the Wyvern Gaming RPG. They have a bull-like appearance and have the funniest ability I have ever heard of in Stargate. They have Labyrinth Instinct. They're able to perfectly recall any path they have traveled and are certain of the correct direction at all times. This power reminds me of something from Spider Island, where people started getting Spider-Man powers. In order to make a vaccine, they give people the ability to tell which way is north. The Minnow's instincts is weirdly funny and kind of useful at the same time. Like, I worry about getting lost, so imagine being able to turn to something that just always knows the way if you have ever traveled a path once. They also have a unique genetic quirk. They were experimented on by the Goa'uld, which has left them all with something called the Curse. It's an inherited trait embedded deep into the Minnows' genetic makeup that causes them to transform into these monstrous creatures called Baelinids. They lose their minds to become animal-like. I apologize for the lack of info I normally would go into. Sadly, back in 2024, Wyvern Games had to be put on hiatus, and the website which hosted most of this information went down this year, like February 2026. One thing I'm curious about is how Minnow's transformation would work with this genetic quirk. Like, would the Omnitrix detect and fix this for the main transformation? We do know there is a serum to halt the transformation in the RPG. Or would the Omnitrix reject the DNA for being corrupted? Personally, and I know this is a long shot, but how cool would it be if the Omnitrix mixed the two? Like, this creates some glitch that lets you shift between the two forms, or if you get stressed enough, you'll go from Minos to Balanid. Or elements of the Balanid DNA begins leaking into the other transformations, making them more monstrous and harder to control. Kind of like the Fulmini arc in the Ben 10 reboot. As for this transformation, I would call it Minnotained. One little mention I want to make before I get to my number 1 is the Nox. Some people might wonder why they're not on this list, and it's kind of the same thing I said about the spirits at the start. We don't really know how their abilities work, if they have biological powers or just advanced technology. If it is biological, then I will go on record and say the Nox could be a powerhouse alien. Imagine being in a fight and you can just make things disappear. But again, it's not clear if this is something they do with their minds or through the use of technology. The sites and sources I use to double check my notes, because again the show is not clear, are not sure either, and they give conflicting information sometimes. One page will say it's mind powers, another will say it's technological. If it is biological, I wouldn't mind switching one of my guys out for a Nox, but due to lack of info, I'm going to play it safe and assume it's not. Personally, I like what the Alderac RPG suggested. They do have mind powers, but they use tech to enhance it so they can do all the cool stuff they do. Number 1, the Asurans. This is probably confusing to some Stargate fans as the Asurans are nanite-based robots. So you think they couldn't count as a transformation, but fun fact, they can. One of Ben's early transformations was Upgrade, a galvanic mechamorph, a race of artificial beings made up of nanites, just like the Asurans. The mechamorphs are described as being techno-organic, but A, Ben has plenty of transformations that appear as robots that wouldn't make sense, but he still has them. And B, Asuran nanites can be made from organic components. That's how humans can be turned into Asurans. So I think they can count as a transformation, and I'm not gonna lie, this would probably be my go-to alien. They have super strength, durability, and while they look human, they can change their form. It's also possible they could turn their hands into blades. And mainly, I think this is only an ability displayed by the Milky Way replicators, but they and the Asurans are supposedly related to one another, so if they can do it, I think the Asurans can do it as well. Their nanite bodies also allow them powers such as walking through walls, sticking their hands in people's heads to see their thoughts. Again, this would be my default transformation, just for how useful and versatile it would be for almost any situation, from military hero or everyday use. Did I mention they are really good at building stuff? Sure, if someone had an anti-replicator weapon, I would be in a lot of trouble, but besides that, I think I would be fine. To end this list off, I'm calling this form Nanophage. And that's my playlist and the end of the video. I want to thank everyone who stayed to the end. I know this was a weird topic, but I had a lot of fun making it. But what do you all think? Would you like to see more weird videos from me, or stick to my normal level of weird videos? Do you disagree with any of the topics I brought up? What Stargate aliens would you pick to be in the watch? Tell me your thoughts below, leave a like and subscribe, follow me on my social medias, and remember...
Oh yeah. Here goes.